Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at this article from Positive Affirmations called Serving One Master, Choosing God Over Money.
Oh, that's a good one.
It is.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating and starts off with this really interesting question. Who or what do you serve? And it's a question that's been around for centuries, and this article really dives into the challenges of trying to, balance our desire for spiritual fulfillment with that pull towards financial success.
Yeah, right from the start, they bring up Matthew 6.24, where it says, you can't serve two masters.
Yeah, it's either God or money.
Right, and that's so powerful.
It is a powerful statement. It's so direct. But why is it that serving those two masters is seen as incompatible? Can't we try to find a way to have both spiritual fulfillment and financial success?
I think the article really points to what each of those masters demands from us. God asks for trust and humility and generosity, of focus on things beyond the material. Yeah. And money, it tends to breed anxiety, greed, this kind of ambition that can become pretty self-serving.
Yeah, and this constant need for more.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that feeling of wanting to have enough to feel secure and in control. And it's like we're programmed to chase that feeling of security, even though we kind of know deep down that money can't fix all of our problems.
Yeah, that's the illusion, isn't it?
It is.
It's this idea that wealth equals control and security.
Yeah.
And the article even says that it's amplified by everything around us. Social media is constantly showing us these lavish lifestyles, making it seem like everyone's rich and living the high life.
Yeah, and it's easy to get caught up in that comparison game.
Right.
Keeping up with the Joneses, as they say.
Yes, exactly.
But the article really encourages us to step back and consider things from an eternal perspective.
Yeah, to really think about what matters in the grand scheme of things.
Right, what really matters.
Because when you do that, your priorities shift. And that's where I think the article's point about eternal values versus temporary gains is so powerful.
Yep.
It's asking us, where are we investing our time, energy, focus? Are we building on something that will last, or are we chasing fleeting pleasures?
There's this one line I think is worth quoting directly. Our time, energy, and focus should go toward building treasures in heaven, not accumulating riches on earth.
I love that line.
It's so powerful.
It really makes you stop and think.
It does.
It challenges us to think beyond the immediate and consider the long-term impact of our choices. What legacy are we building?
Right.
What impact are we going to have?
It's also interesting that the article talks about how serving God actually brings freedom. Not freedom from having to be responsible with your finances.
Right, of course not.
But freedom from that constant worry and that striving that often comes with chasing wealth.
It's about shifting our perspective from one of scarcity to one of abundance.
Yeah.
Trusting that God will provide what we need.
Right. And they even shared this story of a single mom who was drowning in debt and just felt totally overwhelmed.
Oh, wow.
But she turned to God in prayer and she started to experience these unexpected blessings.
Really?
Yeah. Opportunities started opening up for her and her community rallied around her and she found this peace that money couldn't buy.
That's beautiful.
It is. It's a really powerful example of how faith can provide this sense of security that goes beyond anything that material possessions can offer.
I love that.
Yeah.
It really ties into another important point the article makes.
Yeah.
About aligning your life with a purpose.
Right. A purpose that goes beyond just accumulating things.
Exactly.
The article contrasts chasing worldly success with aligning yourself with God's will.
And, one leads to a kind of fleeting accomplishment.
Yeah.
While the other brings a deep sense of meaning, a sense of purpose.
It makes you wonder, though, how do we take these big ideas and actually apply them to our everyday work lives? We've all got bills to pay, right?
Of course. And the article doesn't shy away from that reality.
No, it doesn't.
It emphasizes approaching our work with integrity.
Yeah.
Viewing it as this God-given mission. It's not about rejecting success, but it's about pursuing success with honesty and avoiding those tempting shortcuts that greed whispers in our ears.
And they have some really relatable examples in there.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, they talk about a businessman who chooses to be honest in a deal, even though it means he'll make less profit.
Wow.
And an employee who resists the temptation to gossip at work.
Interesting.
Yeah, these small choices, but they show a commitment to living out their faith in their everyday lives.
It's about those little moments where we align our actions with our values.
Exactly. But the article also cautions against work becoming an idol.
Right.
It reminds us that our worth isn't tied to our productivity.
It's so easy to fall into that trap.
It is.
Yeah.
It's good to remember that rest is important.
Absolutely.
And that we shouldn't let our jobs become our entire identity.
Sometimes taking a step back and prioritizing rest or time with loved ones, that's actually the most productive thing we can do.
It's a good reminder to keep things in perspective.
It is.
Speaking of inspiring examples, the article also shares some stories of people who chose to put their faith before financial gain, and the transformations they experienced are just incredible. There's John, this high-powered executive, who was completely consumed by work, totally driven by ambition.
Oh, wow.
But then a health crisis forced him to rethink his priorities, and he turned to faith. And he ends up discovering that real peace and fulfillment come from serving others, not from climbing the corporate ladder.
It's amazing how life has a way of getting our attention, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
And then there's Lisa.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about Lisa.
She's this young entrepreneur who decided to tithe 10% of her income even when she was struggling financially.
That's a bold move.
It is, especially when money is tight.
But her story's so inspiring. By choosing to give back, even when it didn't make financial sense, she experienced unexpected blessings, and her business actually started to thrive.
I love that it makes you think about the potential benefits of generosity.
Right. It's not just about the money itself.
It's about shifting our mindset from scarcity to abundance.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory behind serving God over money, but what about the practical stuff? What can we actually do to integrate these principles into our lives? The article gives us some really specific advice on that, right?
It does. It offers some really tangible steps that we can all take.
Let's dive into those in part 2. I'm excited to explore those practical strategies.
Me too.
All right, see you there.
Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive on serving God over money. It's great to talk about the ideas, but I bet people are wondering, okay, how do I actually do this?
Totally. It's one thing to be inspired by a concept.
Yeah.
But then it's how do I make this part of my daily life?
Yeah.
The article actually gives us some concrete advice on that.
It does.
So where do we start?
Well, it suggests something really simple but powerful.
Okay.
Start each day with prayer. Just taking a moment to connect with God, to align your goals with His will, seeking guidance for the day ahead.
It's funny how something so basic can get overlooked so easily.
It is.
We get busy and we just kind of forget to pause.
Yeah, we forget to pause and involve God in our plans.
Right, exactly.
And that pause, that intentionality, it can make such a difference.
I could see that.
It shifts us from striving and self-reliance
Yeah.
to a posture of surrender and trust.
It's like acknowledging that we don't have to have it all figured out.
Right.
We're not in this alone.
Exactly.
The article also talks about reflecting on our spending habits.
Yeah, how do our spending habits honor God?
Yeah, that's a tough question.
It is. It makes you look at where your money's going.
Yeah.
And if it's aligning with your values, are you spending on things that matter, or are you caught in this cycle of consumerism?
Yeah, that just leaves you empty.
Exactly.
It's about being mindful, intentional.
Right.
It's not about depriving yourself or living in poverty.
No, not at all.
But it's about being a good steward of what you've been given.
Yeah, recognizing that everything we have is a gift.
Yeah, a gift from God.
And this leads to the next practical step.
Okay.
Look for opportunities to be generous.
Oh, I love that because it really shifts the focus, doesn't it?
It does.
From hoarding wealth to sharing it.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be some grand gesture.
Right. It doesn't have to be these huge donations.
Right. Even small acts of generosity can make a difference.
It's like those ripple effects.
Exactly.
Whether it's donating to a cause or helping a neighbor, even just a kind word.
Or a gesture.
Every bit counts.
Every act of giving matters.
It does.
Yeah.
So those are great starting points.
Yeah.
But the article goes on to suggest some longer-term strategies.
Right, more long-term stuff.
Yeah, like creating a financial plan that prioritizes tithing and giving.
That's huge.
Yeah, the article specifically mentions tithing.
Giving 10% of your income back to your church or a charity you support.
Right, a practice that's been around forever.
It's a way to acknowledge God's provision in our lives.
It's definitely an act of faith.
It is.
Especially when you're facing financial challenges,
You got to trust that God will honor that.
Provide for you.
It's about trust.
It is.
And that long-term thinking also applies to career choices.
Yeah.
The article says we should evaluate our careers.
Okay.
Not just based on salary, but on purpose, too.
Alignment with our values.
Exactly.
So important these days when there's so much pressure to chase those high-paying jobs, even if they don't make us happy.
It is, yeah.
Like, does my work contribute to something meaningful? Am I using my gifts and talents to make a difference? That kind of thing.
Those are the questions we need to ask ourselves.
It's about finding that sweet spot where passion and purpose overlap.
I love that.
Me too. And then finally, stay grounded in Scripture.
Yeah, the article really emphasizes that.
You know, it's so easy to get caught up in the world's messages about money.
Right, and material possessions.
But the Bible gives us a different perspective.
Yeah.
A framework for understanding our relationship with money.
And for navigating the temptations that come with it.
Yeah, reading and reflecting on Scripture really helps us stay rooted in truth, doesn't it?
It's like having a compass to guide us through life's complexities.
I like that analogy.
So we've covered some practical steps.
Yeah.
But let's be real for a second.
Okay.
Choosing faith over finances can be tough.
For sure. There are going to be obstacles and doubts along the way.
Absolutely.
So what does the article say about overcoming those challenges?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles is fear.
Okay.
Fear of not having enough.
Yeah, that's a big one.
The worry that if you prioritize giving, you won't have enough for yourself.
That's a very real fear, especially in a society that tells us we need more, more, more.
Yeah, it's constant.
But the article has a really reassuring message.
It does.
Trusting God doesn't mean being irresponsible with your money.
Right.
It's about planning wisely and managing your resources carefully.
But ultimately believing that God will provide.
So it's about shifting our perspective.
It is.
Instead of putting all our faith in our bank accounts, we choose to put our trust in God.
Exactly. And another challenge is peer pressure.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
You know, when everyone around you is equating success with wealth, choosing to live differently can be tough.
Yeah, it can lead to judgment and criticism.
It takes courage to stand firm in your faith when you're surrounded by people who don't share your values.
I could definitely relate to that.
Yeah, it takes courage, but the article reminds us that the rewards of choosing God over money, they far outweigh any temporary discomfort or disapproval we might face.
It's about keeping our eyes on the prize.
Exactly.
So how do we know if we're making progress?
Yeah.
Like, what are the signs that we're actually choosing God over money?
It's not about checking things off a list.
Okay.
It's about looking for changes within us.
So internal shifts more than external ones.
Exactly. And there are some telltale signs that this shift is happening. Well, you might notice a growing sense of contentment.
Interesting. How does contentment show up in our lives? Does it mean we stop striving for more? Interesting. How does contentment show up in our lives? Does it mean we stop striving for more?
Not necessarily. I think it's more about,
Okay.
finding satisfaction in what truly matters, like our relationships, our purpose,
Right.
our connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Right.
We begin to appreciate the good things we already have instead of always chasing after what we don't.
So we shift our focus away from just material possessions to those deeper things that bring fulfillment.
Exactly. And that shift often leads to a sense of peace, especially when it comes to finances.
Yeah.
When we trust that God will provide, we can let go of that anxiety and worry about money.
Right.
You start to manage your money with wisdom, responsibility, but without that constant fear.
That would be huge for so many people.
It would be. It really would.
To just release that financial anxiety.
It allows us to experience a deeper level of freedom. Freedom from that pressure to accumulate more. Freedom to be generous.
Yeah, so that's another sign then.
It is.
The desire to be more generous.
When we align our hearts with God's,
Okay.
we naturally want to share.
It's not about holding on so tightly to everything we have.
Right. It's about using what we have to make a difference.
Yeah, our whole definition of wealth changes.
It expands beyond our own personal accounts. We start to see abundance everywhere, and we want to be a part of it.
Yeah, and it doesn't just have to be about money either, right?
No, not at all. Generosity can be about our time, our talents, our energy, anything we have to offer.
That reminds me of a quote from the article. True riches are found in relationships, peace, and a life aligned with God's purpose.
I love that. It's so true.
It really is. When we choose to serve God over money, we tap into something so much bigger.
It's a wealth that goes beyond anything material.
Right. It's about purpose and meaning and connection.
It really is.
So it's about recognizing that true fulfillment comes from following God's priorities.
Absolutely. But, it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's not like a destination we reach.
Right.
It's a process of seeking guidance and examining our motivations and adjusting along the way.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final question to think about, building on what we've talked about today.
Okay.
If you could let go of one material possession to gain more peace and purpose in your life, what would it be and why?
That's a great question. It really makes you think about what you're holding on to.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the age-old question of serving God over money.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope this has inspired you to take a look at your own priorities and to consider what it truly means to live a life aligned with God's purpose.
We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them with us online.
Yeah, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Until then, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.